the Eddie Hernandez era. That was when the rivalry between you and Kai Greene began. Is that correct?
Correct.
The king, it's written as you are the king of earnings of the WNBF during that era with $19,650 respectively.
Yeah, right.
That's wild to think, like, as far as we're talking back to the 90s. So what does that mean to you? Like when you look back at that time, do you recall what that was like from a training standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my day started at 3:15 in the morning.
This is legendary to have you here today. We're going to talk about some of that contest history. We're talking 1995
Correct.
WNBF World Champion overall, which
Yes.
is legendary within the first 6 years of when the WNBF started. And if we date back, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say that? When we're talking about the 1995 overall World Championships, what comes to mind?
Just the training, the schedule, the discipline that it took to become that. It was my third or fourth try at the World Championships. I can't describe the discipline and the motivation, the dedication, and the support that I got from everybody that was involved in it. When I think back, also, it's amazing because I lost so much of what else was going on around me that the only thing that mattered in those days was training, eating, and family. I didn't know anything else outside of that.
Yeah, that's understandable because that's no small achievement. When we're talking about that era, the Eddie Hernandez era, I was looking back and I got some old records pulled up, and that was when the rivalry between you and Kai Greene began. Is that correct?
Correct. There was plenty of guys that I always thought about when I was training, and I had the temptation of maybe not doing that next rep or that next set. There were certain guys that were always on my mind, and he was definitely one of them. And from the standpoint of how much mass he could carry, he was one of the guys that could match up with my size. And the one thing that I've always felt confident about, that I was always going to have an edge on people, that I didn't ever think that they were going to train harder than me. They weren't going to come in harder than me. They weren't going to be as conditioned as I was. So a lot of times when I thought about doing certain things that would hinder that look, I never gave in.
So when we talk about that discipline, when we're looking back at that era within the 90s, do you recall what that was like from a training standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my day started at 3:15 in the morning. I would wake up, I would have my breakfast. 4 o'clock, I was in the gym, training myself. 5 o'clock, I was doing my first client, and I would do a client every hour on the hour till about 11. At 11 o'clock, I ate lunch. 12:30, I would do a cardio session. And then I would have a 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock session. 5 o'clock, I'd come home, I'd eat dinner and have a 6 o'clock appointment, 7 o'clock appointment, and lights out at 8.
Hmm. Wow. So you were a trainer.
Yes. Back in
Okay.
those days, I was training people for a living. Yes.
Okay. And when did that transition to what you're doing now? What age were you roughly when that happened?
2012, I became a full-time teacher, a phys ed teacher at my high school right nearby, and then I became a assistant dean, which is what I am now, assistant dean of students at my high school. I've been coaching football since 2001, so I've been doing that for a long time, and it's what I enjoy doing now. Don't get me wrong, I still train. I still train myself 4 or 5 days a week. Try to keep myself in what I call trigger shape. What I mean by that is that if I ever do decide to get back into a show or step up back on stage, it's not going to take too long, for me to get myself in shape. I'm currently about 225 and still pretty hard.
Okay. And we're going to talk about that, the current Eddie Hernandez, where you're currently at. But before we do, you mentioned before, well, when we're going back, dating back to that time when you won the overall title at WNBF Worlds, what was your weight leading up?
217,
217 on stage?
27 on stage. I
Wow.
weighed 217 pounds that morning. I remember stepping on a scale at the hotel and I was 217. I had planned on coming in around 210, 215, but that's what I came in at. I probably got myself down to about 213 at the prejudging, and then that next, before I got on stage at night, I was up to 217.
Wow. And how tall are you, Eddie?
5'10.
5'10". Okay, so you're an
Yes.
out like you're definitely an outlier. At that 95 World Championships, who comes to mind as a competitor? Because I'm not even familiar, like the records are not, there's no records of this, by the way. So that I'm aware of at least.
Well, you had guys like Joe Patterson. I don't know if you remember that name, Joe Patterson. Obviously, Dwayne Broadway, Gary Gomez, David, Texas Shredder, Goodin, David
Oh, Dave
Goodin.
Goodin was there. Okay.
Yeah, Dave Goodin, I believe, took third in that show. The runner-up was Jose Guzman. There's a story with Jose Guzman that I can, relate to or talk about in a little bit because he's actually the guy that got me to switch from powerlifting into bodybuilding.
Okay. Let's talk
Um,
about that. So are you talking about before competing at Worlds? You switched,
yes,
obviously. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Before I competed in the worlds in 1995. In 1990, Jose, no, 1991, Jose was training for the World Championships that were being held that year in Finland, I believe. And he goes, he saw me in the gym and asked me, hey, you look like you got a pretty good shape to yourself. You're thick, and I was about 253 pounds at the time. I said, yeah, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I mean, I know about bodybuilding and I know what it takes to become a bodybuilder. I'm not sure if I can stick to a diet. And I just decided that day, I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm not playing football anymore. Let me give this a shot. I'm not going to go into powerlifting anymore because there was no need for me to lift in that manner anymore. And I gave it a shot. I got that myself down from 253 down to 197. I felt like the Walking Dead. Entered my first natural show, which is the Natural Eastern Classic. And I went in there as a novice and I took the whole entire show. I took the overall, my weight class, the overall, and that was the beginning. After that, a couple months later, the following year in '92, I decided let me go into the NPC Suburban, which was not a drug tested show,
Right.
and there were some big names that were in that show. Bo Matlock, I don't know if you remember that guy.
No.
He ended up winning the nationals in the NPC. He was
Mm.
in my weight class. Obviously, he took first place. I ended up taking third place in that show. And I'd say, this is not for me, man. Here I am looking my best that I've ever looked. I trained my behind off and I came in third place. Holy smokes. So I said, this is it with these types of shows. Got ready for the U.S. championships, which was a pro qualifier for the WNBF. And I ended up winning the entire show there. I planned on entering the universe that year, which was being held out in Detroit, but it got canceled. So I continued training for the Worlds in '92, and I ended up taking second place in the tiebreaker to Kevin Davidson.
Kevin Davidson is also a overall world title, I think
Yes,
he, right? Yeah.
that was the year he won it. Yeah, the year I lost to
Ah,
him, I took second. And then the following year again, once again, I took second. That was 93, 92, 92, I took second. 93, I took second. 94, I tried to play like that size game. You know what? I'm going to come in bigger.
hmm.
And I ended up taking seventh. And that's when I ran into Kai Greene. That's when it all started between me and Kai Greene. I took seventh, and I believe Kai Greene took ninth. And
Wow. And that Kai was young though, right? He was, I think, like a teenager at the
he
time,
was
right?
19, I believe, at the
19.
time. Yeah.
Okay.
So the following year, that was 95. I was getting ready for the U.S. Cup, World Cup, I think they called it back then. I took second to Kai. The universe, I took second to Kai. I forget who won 94. It's been such a
Oh,
long time.
hold on. I think I have it. How old were you by the way at this time? Well,
In
first
95, when I won it all, I was 33.
33. Okay.
Right.
Oh, and how lean were you coming in? I have a few pictures that I was able to find of you. Like were you coming in with like striated glutes? Was that a thing back then? Because it's hard to
Yeah,
see through the
it was.
photos.
It wasn't something that I tried for. It's something that just came. Once I did that, I accomplished that. I made that a new level of standard for myself and measured my readiness for stage by that. And how did I do that?
Okay.
Whenever I would sit down, I literally would feel the bones in my behind. And I said, "Wow, we're getting there."
Yeah. So Gary Gomez is the one who won 94.
94, yes, 94. Gary Gomez. You're right. Gary
Yeah.
Gomez won.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was listening to an interview of Kai. He brought up Mike McLeod. It was a recent interview, like maybe 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about how that man inspired Kai Greene at that time when he was just getting into competing.
Right.
And he had said that. Does that name ring a bell, by the way, Mike
Yes, Mike
McLeod?
McLeod was one of those other guys that was always on my radar because he was one of the few guys that came in as vascular and as hard as I did. he came in really shredded. I remember Mike McLeod when I first made my pro debut. I saw him. I was sitting in the back getting ready. I always kept my clothes on, and I had seen him, and I saw who was the other guy that I saw? Another ex-champ was Johnny Green, I believe, or
Oh,
Doyle
Johnny
Washington.
Green. Yeah, yeah,
Johnny
91.
Green, yes, and Doyle Washington. And I
Okay.
said, wow, these are the guys that I saw, I was seeing in the magazines all the time. And it just felt weird. I said, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I said, hell, you're not. It's like I started talking to myself, the hell that you're not ready for this. You trained your behind off. You're up here. You're up here for a reason. Get out there and let's do some damage. And
Mm,
that's the year I took second. That's the
that's the
year I
year you
took
took
second.
second.
Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah. The
And
following year was
that was the year. Oh yeah, 93. Right, right, right.
Kevin Davidson, right?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was and they
94.
94 was Gomez. That's right.
Yeah, that's the year I took seventh.
Yes. Yes.
And then
Okay. And
95 was the year that I
that
came
you
back.
won it. Yeah. And the
Yes.
universe, right? You won the universe that
Universe
year.
also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And Kai Greene was talking about in that interview how he was not coming in that lean, like as lean as you guys were. He was quite young. This is him speaking to that in the interview.
I used to love ice cream. I used to talk devotional stories to ice cream. There's a guy named Mike McLeod, an amazing athlete. I met Mike McLeod at the competition, and he was amazing.
You beat him.
While I was in the office to pick up my check, I happened to look over and I saw Mike McLeod. When I saw him, I had to pay the credit to him. I said, Mr. McLeod, I really want to have your condition one day, and he was like, okay, great. Just then I saw him have this little thing of ice cream. It was tiny. I began to laugh. He said, yeah, but this is all I'm going to have. And I'm going to be right back on my diet. And I'm going to see you next year. And I remember thinking like, I love ice cream. And he said, yeah, but you also haven't gotten the condition that I've gotten into yet. I knew at that time in my life, if I was going to be ready to face Mike McLeod again the next year, I needed to be able to be better.
Did you go cold turkey on the ice cream?
I haven't had ice cream since. Thank you, Mike McLeod.
I don't know when he started really clean. I think he cleaned up in 96. I think it was literally the following year he won. Yeah, 96.
I think 90. Yeah, 96 he won. Yeah, he actually won everything. I took second place to him.
Second. Well, what happened that year? What happened that year? Talk about that year.
Nothing really happened. I thought I came in better than I came in 95. Kai Greene just came in better than what I came in 96.
Okay.
I tipped my hat off to him. I mean, he beat me. I don't think he came in as hard as I did, but I think he had a little bit more size, and it was enough to, for him to earn the title.
That's wild to think because he was quite young still. Like we're talking 24 or something, right? No, 20.
Yeah.
He was quite young, right?
Probably 21, 22 at the oldest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So to think that he had more size, it just shows you that that guy was genetically on a level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, which makes sense given where he's at now with like competing in the Olympia and everything, right?
Right.
Obviously now there's performance enhancers involved, but still, like, guys that have been on I'm sure we've all seen examples of people who've been on performance enhancers and are not anything like where Kai Greene is at like even when he stood next to Phil Heath, like you're like, this guy's wide as a house.
Yeah.
Like he's so wide. That's just genetics, right? So
yes. And he had perfect genetics for the sport.
Right.
I never considered myself a genetic freak like that. I always felt that my conditioning was always something that I had an edge on with people and against people. I always felt that I could get as lean as anybody that was ever going to step up on stage.
Who was one competitor that you remember clearly, like this guy's a problem? Was it Kai Greene at that time, basically?
Oh, absolutely. Kai Greene was
Yeah.
definitely a problem. Joe Patterson was a problem. David Goodin, if you didn't come in like in ripped shape, he was going to be a problem. I don't know if you remember Tricky Jackson. He was another one. Very good shape. Him, he was could be a problem. Matter of fact, I found out years later that Tricky Jackson is related to Dexter Jackson. They're cousins.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And there was a guy from Virginia, David Hamlet, another one who was very tough, good shape. Wasn't a real big guy, but you know what? He was going to bring in a good package. And if you didn't come ready, you were going to get beat.
Now you cleaned up the king. It's written as you are the king of earnings of the WNBF during that era with $19,650 respectively.
Yeah, right.
That's wild to think, like, as far as we're talking back to the 90s. So what does that mean to you? Like when you look back at that time, when you won that, were you like, whoa, this is maybe this could be something?
I really didn't even think about it that way. I really didn't even know that was something that they were following or something they were keeping track of. But when I saw that centerfold poster of it, I was like, wow. I really cleaned up here. It just tells me that, you know what, I was in the top 6 every single year that I competed,
Right.
except for one.
Now, 97, you didn't compete. 98, you didn't compete. So
No,
basically, you stopped competing after 96 with the WNBF. You retired basically.
correct. Yeah, there were several reasons that I think back. I think there was a lot of stress that I put on myself. I expected certain things about myself. A lot of people that were coming out to see me, I didn't want to let them down. I felt like I owed that to them. And for me not to be able to reach the level that I thought I could reach, it wouldn't be fair to them. I mean, these guys were traveling from far away to come see me. And then with the possibility of me not being able to display what I had that night in the night show, that would be a big disappointment.
That's understandable. Yeah. So basically, after that 97 contest, you were retired from competing altogether. You never stepped on stage again.
No, unless it was like some type of guest posing exhibition or something like that. I did that up until 2001. I was still guest posing for people. I even ran my own show for a little bit. And then
Yeah.
I got totally out of the sport. Yeah. And
What was that with the WNBF? You were doing your own show?
I ran my own show. Yes. Yep. And then
Okay.
I believe the people that took it over was Nancy Andrews. Somebody with
Yeah.
Nancy Andrews. Yeah. I forget the guy's name. He's a Jersey guy also. That also became a pro qualifier years later.
Wow. Yeah, because I know
Yeah.
Dwayne is still running his show.
Yes, he is. Yeah. I
Yeah.
always try to get out to it, but that's during football season. And I am so busy with coaching. I don't have time to even go to shows. I never even really went to shows when I was competing. Nobody
That's
saw
hilarious.
me until it was time for me to step up on stage for the most part.
Wow, you're hibernating, man. You were in the dungeon working.
And that's literally what I was working at. It was a dungeon. It was a good no frills gym, just barbells and dumbbells.
Wow. Okay, we're gonna get into this training, but before we do, I want to date back for a second. So before the WNBF, you competed in the NPC. Did you have aspirations to? You didn't do it, but did you have aspirations to maybe go the IFBB route? You saw Kai and everything. Was that ever on your radar at any point?
No, I didn't want to go that route. A lot of people tried to steer me in that direction, and I just saw no reason for it. I mean, why would I want to risk my health? I'm married, I have kids, and it's not fair to them. I wouldn't risk my health for a dopey trophy.